What's up, bosses? Welcome to another episode of About Her Business, the podcast where we leave all the gossip at the door and get straight down to business. I'm your host, John Tay, and today we have Downstage Media CEO, Miss Annie Figenshu. Now, not only does Miss Figenshu help myself and other entrepreneurs create content marketing, she also has a background in improv comedy. And she's here today to offer some humor on what she means business. So, ladies, grab those cups and those notepads and let's get down to it. The meeting is now in session. Welcome, Miss Figenshu.
The meeting is in session. I love that. Yes. Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today. Let's get started. What is your current role right now at Downstage Media?
Yeah. So I started the company in 2017.
Mm.
And basically, I'm what I like to call the face of the brand, right? So I do work with other content creators. I do have VAs that I might work with, but mostly I'm a one woman show. So at Downstage Media, we work with other companies that have a main face of their brand. And maybe that person is face that goes out on social media. Maybe that person is a keynote speaker. And by doing those content tasks, it helps to get the word out about the company, right? And so what I do is I'll come in and I'll say, okay, let's figure out what the words are that you're going to use to talk about your company. Let's figure out where you're going to put those words in your marketing. And let's make sure that you're only putting out content that's genuinely going to help move the needle on your business. So that's what I do. And I started the company back in 2017.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And you did mention marketing in that. What originally made you realize, though, that founders were struggling with what to say, not necessarily how to market?
I realized that from being a business owner myself, there were so many different times that people would say to me, hey, can you give us a little bio or tell us a bit about your company? It comes up all the time when you're interviewed on a podcast like this, when you're going to be speaking at an event and they want to have your byline, or when you're trying to put up your first website, when you're trying to create social media content, when you are sending an email out to your list for the first time, right? You need to have words to talk about your business. And so I found when I first started that I was always coming up with new stuff every time. And I realized that reading one book, and I'll tell you what that book is in a second, but from specifically reading that book, I realized that if you just have the talking points that you can refer to time and time and time again, it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to come up with the words from scratch every time. And not only is it easier for you as a business owner, but it's easier for your audience to understand what you offer and how it makes their lives better and how they can get it. You're branding your business by using those same turns of phrase over and over and over again. It's helping you because it's just less to remember and you always know what to pull from. And it helps them because they hear those same words. The repetition is helpful for them to understand who you are.
Did mention at the beginning
Yeah.
that have that background in improv comedy.
Yes. Mhm.
So let's get into it because
Okay.
I'm super excited. Can you first of all explain to our audience exactly what that is and what it may look like?
Sure. So I was in a few different shows in New York City where we didn't have a script. So there's stand-up comedy where the comic will usually write material at home and then they'll try it out on stage. You've seen this a million times, right? A comic stands in front of a microphone and delivers their material. With improv comedy, it's usually a group of people. I was in a show oftentimes that had 4 or maybe 5 people in the cast, and the show itself was usually based on suggestions from the audience. Sometimes it would be short games like you might see in Whose Line Is It Anyway? Sometimes it might be longer improvised pieces where, for example, I was in one show called Broadway's Next Hit Musical, where we would make up a 25-minute musical on the spot. All the words, all the rhymes, all the choreography, everything was completely made up out of thin air. And so that's what really taught me what words are going to affect an audience in the moment
Mhm.
And it helped me really get way faster in my thinking. And I still use that today. So when clients are working with me, they know that if they have a half hour call, or like for anyone who's listening in here, you'll notice that I'm going to give you a bunch of different ideas in the course of this conversation because my brain works on hyper speed. And that's partly from having to think up in the moment what the song lyrics are gonna be because the musician is still playing the song. Like, you have to make sure that you come up with those words fast. And so it was great training for that.
Wow. And it does sound like it's a lot of hard work, but it does sound like you picked up a lot of skills as well doing improv comedy. And you've taken that and put it into your business. So how does those skills translate, helping founders translate their messaging?
Yes. So there's a bunch of different ways. So I mentioned already that just my brain works faster, right? So I know that when we're meeting that I'm going to be able to deliver a whole bunch of ideas really, really quickly. And that when I'm working with the companies that I work with, that they feel safe enough and free enough to also come up with ideas on their own, right? It becomes a really, really organic and exciting process to be able to co-create the words that are going to have an effect on that company's audience. And they know that I had 15 years where if I didn't come up with the words that would affect an audience, I would bomb. It would be awful. It would feel bad. So I know that I can come up with a lot of those words just because I have a lot of that practice. I have an idea of how different turns of phrase are going to affect an audience. I don't know exactly, which is why I need to understand that by talking to the client. But many times I've been able to hone that from what I do in improv. But also, this is a weird one.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that improv comedy taught me was story structure, right? So, in order to make up a 20-minute musical, we wouldn't know what the musical would be about before we went on stage. We knew the basic structure of a story, right? Where, once upon a time there's a world, and every day this is what happens in the world until one day something happens. So, there's certain elements of story that we've known for thousands of years as humans, and as improvisers, we study it so that way we can come up with those stories on the fly. It wasn't until, and this is the book that I had mentioned before, until I read the book Building a Story Brand from Donald Miller, where he took that story structure and he used it for marketing structure. So that way your audience becomes the hero of the story that your company tells.
Mhm.
Right? Your audience is right there. They are the Luke Skywalker. They are the Dorothy. And the brand becomes the Obi-Wan Kenobi. The brand becomes the Good Witch, right? And they usher you through and they tell you this is the path that you're going to go on so that way you can win the day. When I took my improv training, I put it together by reading the book Building a Story Brand. That really helped me understand how to craft messages for companies that help them sell more of whatever it is that they're offering.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like you took it and made it into a complete formula for success for your business.
Well, I mean, I knew what I knew about story structure.
Mhm.
Donald Miller, with his book Building a Story Brand, turned it into a framework. And I said, I got to meet this guy. I got to meet this Donald Miller. So
Uh-huh.
I became certified in this framework. I met him. I now get to him and hear him speak and learn from him all the time. And I color it with my own color that I bring to the table from 15 years as an improv comic, from just being a word nerd in general, and just understanding, hey, it's important to know the words that you're going to use to talk about your brand. And it's important to figure out where you're going to put those words so your audience can see them.
You've not only practiced it, you've researched it and went out and actually met the people behind it. That's amazing, by the way.
Well, okay. And you know what I want to say too
Mhm.
is that if you are listening to this and you are trying to start your own company, right? You're trying to get it off the ground. I went to the library. Like, I didn't even buy the book. I didn't have any kind of startup capital. I didn't have anything, right? Like, I learned this stuff. I had an infant and a 3-year-old, and I learned this stuff at nighttime and nap time, right?
Mhm.
Like, I didn't launch Downstage Media until both of my children were in school 5 days a week, all day. I just couldn't. I just knew that I wasn't gonna be able to. My husband at the time, we're no longer married, but he was traveling. He's an actor, and he was traveling 200 days of the year. So for 200 days of the year, I had to figure that I had no childcare, and I couldn't figure out a job where I was gonna be able to up the kids and get them down for their naps and do all of the stuff that we have to do as parents with a full-time job. And back in 2010, 2011, 2012, there just wasn't that many remote options the way that there were now. And I just said, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out my own path to do that. Right. So I read the book, library. I started implementing just the basic idea of it with some of my clients. And once I found how successful they were, I said, okay, first of all, I started charging more. Second of all, then I was able to get the money to become certified and have access to the person who wrote it, and then became a leader in that community where just last week he spoke. So Donald Miller spoke for, 45 minutes, and I went right after him and I spoke for 25, right? So that's what happened over the course of the years together. But I think that if you're listening to this and you have an idea and you believe in your idea, you might have to get pretty freaking scrappy in order to bring it to fruition. And I'm a huge proponent of that.
You mentioned women entrepreneurs and being
Mhm.
mothers, and I will admit, as one myself, it can be quite difficult. So let's talk about women entrepreneurs and the pressure to feel like we have to be professional. How do you help women entrepreneurs find their real voice?
So, one thing that I do to help find their voice when they are the face of the brand, right? Or they're a solopreneur, right? They're just getting started. First of all, I think what's really important is to recognize that your work matters, right? It is important to get paid and it's important to make money. But the way that you make that money is usually by having some kind of a transformation that your customer has. And it's understanding, how is that person different from before they started working with you to after? And it's tapping into and understanding that and saying your work has value. So we need to figure out a way for you to be able to that value to more people, so more people can have that transformation. So we've got to believe in that idea enough. Now, the mechanics of how do I help them find their voice might be things like, what do you say when you talk to your audience a lot? Let's use those words because that's what they're going to hear. What is it that your audience says when you ask them how working with you or how using your product or how using your service has helped them? What are the words that they use? Let's tap into those words too, right? And so that's what I oftentimes go to when we need to find the words. But when someone needs to find their voice
Mhm.
and the reason why they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, even though their kids don't wake up till 6:30, and they put in that extra hour and a half, even though it's dark, even though it's cold, even though they're tired, that's what helps propel them. That's what helped me drop off my kids at school, work from 9:30 to 2:30 and put in 5 hours then, put the kids to bed, and then work from 8 to 11 at night. I did that for years, right? And then I woke up again and I did the next day. Oh, by the way, one of the reasons I would keep those hours is because I could drop off my one daughter at school, and at the YMCA, you might have a YMCA near you. The one near me had free childcare, and that was really important because I did not have access to childcare. I didn't have money for a babysitter. It wasn't an option for me. Nanny wasn't an option. I live in a I live in a fancy area, but it just wasn't an option for me. So I could go to the YMCA. They had an hour and a half of free childcare that they would give every day. I would spend 45 minutes working out, and I would spend 45 minutes working on my business. And I felt like that was free childcare where I could work on myself and work on my business at the same time. It cost me, well, nothing except the cost of the cost of the YMCA, but that worked for my budget. But I think it's just finding ways around what you can do, right? Like everyone's got limitations, not easy, but
Mhm.
if you're smart and if you're driven and if you're not afraid to be scrappy, you can get there.
I agree, and I just wanna be one of those people that say, even if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're thinking about starting your own business, it's okay if you have the funding to put your kids in daycare just so you can have that extra time if you needed to start your business, because I was one of those people that thought I was a bad mom if I put my baby in daycare to
Mhm.
dreams, but it worked out great, and my daughter still loves me, and I know your kids will still love you too.
Do you want me to tell you another strategy that I used when my kids were really little?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay. So here's another one that I would do. I had read somewhere something about 45 minutes being a block of time that can kind of help you in the zone. I know, like, ideally you'll be there for like 90 minutes or something, but I just felt like as a mom, I only had so much time, right? So 45 minutes working out, 45 minutes working on the business. That's what I would do when I put the kids at the YMCA. But before I had the YMCA and I couldn't afford daycare, then we could afford it. But my husband at the time didn't feel like it was a worthwhile investment.
Mhm.
So some of you might be dealing with that kind of a thing. But anyway, it wasn't an option for me. So one thing that I would do was I would drop off my daughter at preschool. And then my other daughter, who was like 2 or 1.5, she could have, in order to have an hour and a half of work time, she could have 45 minutes of like screen time and then 45 minutes where she just had to play independently. And she knew that, right? I forget exactly what I used for her to understand like 45 minutes, right? But, I just set her up with things that I knew that she could play with. And she just, grew her attention span so she could do that. And that worked out pretty well for me. It wasn't great. It wasn't the most focused time. She was still a toddler. She was still tugging on my sleeve a bunch, but she knew that she wasn't going to get 100% of me during that time and that she was gonna get 45 minutes of screen time after that, right? So, that's kinda how I made that work too, and then again, I worked at nighttime and I worked at nap time.
There's another tip, y'all. So, if you're ready to start that business, there's really many, 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 many options out there for you. You just have to be willing to go out there and research them for yourselves. So, thing about life is you don't necessarily truly grow unless you learn from those lessons that life teaches you. I want to get your advice on those early lessons that you learned, and how did those lessons change how you think about sustainability in content and growth?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you some lessons that I learned the hard way. I am, like I said, from New Jersey. I live about 10 minutes away from Gary Vaynerchuk's wine library. I'm very inspired by Gary Vaynerchuk. He has been a very important force in content marketing for a very long time. And I loved it because he lived 10 minutes from my house. And he would put out all these books and he put out all these ideas. And I could learn from him for free or yeah, usually for free because I would either watch his stuff on Instagram or I would read his books from the library. Great. And then he would go to wine library and he would do a book signing and I would get to meet him and I would get to talk to him and stuff like that. Great. I tried to do what he did. I
Mm,
tried to copy him. He was putting out hundreds of pieces of content every week. I thought I could keep up. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I really wanted it bad enough,
mm,
I could do it. The fact of the matter is I couldn't. I
mm.
couldn't keep up with that. And I felt awful then when I didn't. If I had the goal of, let's say, posting 5 times a week on 3 different social media platforms, and I couldn't because my daughter got sick that week or there was snow days and so then they weren't in school and I wasn't able to create the content, then I felt like a failure and I hated that feeling. So last year, at the beginning of 2025, I started doing another more sustainable way of getting not only my content out, but it was helpful for growth of the business and growth of my network, which helps to grow the business. I find content, networking, and money making activities, all three of those things, when I have them in place, they help grow the business.
Mhm,
So I did this is the philosophy, which is more often than not.
mhm,
So I would try to spend a certain amount of time, as you could hear, I'm pretty obsessed with time. So I would take a half hour to create content, whether that's on my blog. You go to downstage.media/blog. That's my blog. I put out a new post pretty much every 2 weeks, or spend a half hour networking and meeting up with people who are just sort of colleagues, where I will ask them for advice or insights or for recommendations, or money making activities, having sales calls, putting together a proposal, making sure that I'm invoicing people, right? So I make sure that I do those three things about a half hour at a time more often than not, meaning probably about 3 times a week. If I can't do it 3 times in a week, then I'll try to do it about, you know, I don't know, if I'm working like 20 days of the year, I'm sorry, 20 days of the month, then I'll try to do it 11 days of the month, right? So I just try to do that more often than not. So spend a certain amount of time creating content, a certain amount of time networking, and a certain amount of time with money making activities, and doing that often than not. I find that has helped me sustainably put out content regularly on my blog and on social media. I'm pretty much only on LinkedIn. And it has helped me. I mean, my divorce, over $80,000. I was able to support myself through that. I was able to still keep the lights on. I was able to move to a different place. And I was able to keep my business up and running partly because of doing those money making tasks and doing that networking, making sure I was doing those things more often than not. So I find that philosophy of more often than not is sustainable. And then making sure that you're doing content, networking, and money making activities to move the needle.
y'all she was talking because she gave you several other tips. She also included the money-making tips. So, y'all missed it. Make sure you hit play.
You know what, though? Also, if you missed it, definitely listen to the replay and please reach out to me. I would be happy to hear that you heard it on this podcast. You can absolutely go to downstage.media. You'll be able to schedule a call with me. Please do that. I would be happy to go through any of this stuff with any of you listeners. I really believe in how important it is. Like I was not in a great situation. I had to get out of my situation. It cost a ton of money. It cost a ton of heartache, but I got out and I spoke to so many women who weren't able to because they had stopped working when they had children. And I completely understand that. I honestly wish that that was an option I could have had, but I didn't have that option. But I did have the option to get out because of what I had built in my business. And I want to make sure that other women are able to have the option to get out, especially if they need to.
And again, thank you for your honesty because that is literally how we all grow and learn this community of women that's looking to grow our businesses and become successful. So if you missed out on the downstage media information, don't worry. We're going to make sure we get all of that and it's going to be down in the comment section for you guys. So just stick around for a little while longer, you guys. Now, we've been talking about sustainable content for a minute.
Mhm.
In your opinion, what is sustainable content and how do you know it's long term?
So, you know it's long term whether or not you're actually able to keep up with the cadence. If you say to yourself, I'm going to post something on LinkedIn 3 times a week, then are you able to do that? If you're not able to do that, then that's not sustainable. If you are able to do it, then it is, right? So, I have found that it is better to be on less platforms
Mhm.
and be able to show up well than to be on more platforms. Now, I wrote a book called Simple Social Media, right? And people are like, "Oh, aren't you on Instagram? Aren't you on TikTok? Aren't you here?" No, I'm not because it's not sustainable.
Mhm.
But meanwhile, where I do show up helps people understand what I offer, how it's going to make their lives better, and how they can get it. And so then, instead of being in more places, the fewer places that I'm in, people know how to reach out to me. I know I'm showing up well, and I know that I'm going to be able to turn many of those into colleagues, into revenue, into different opportunities for me.
And before we move on, though, I do want to talk about your book. So, can you give our audience just a little snippet of exactly what the book is and let us know where we can find it?
Sure. You could go to simplesocialmediabook.com. That's where you could find it. And the book is called Simple Social Media. So when I first got started, I was creating social media content for brands. And I found that I was always bugging the business owner because I needed more pictures or I needed more information about their upcoming events or things like that, right? I felt like I was always tugging on the sleeve of the business owner, and that was annoying to them. So I realized that there's a few bits of information that I needed that if I got that basic information, I could create a lot of other content from it. And you were talking about sustainability. I realized that most people, not unlike when they go to the gym, they say, okay, I'm going to start posting on social media. I'm going to post 5 times a week. And they burn out. They're not able to do it. I came up with a system where you eventually get to posting 5 times a week, but you build up to it. And so in Simple Social Media, I talk about those different buckets that you need to have. So that way you know what the content is that you're going to create. And then how you can distribute it in a way that you are regularly putting out content, a bunch of content that's ready to go. And I don't have a third regularly, just those two things that you're putting stuff out regularly. And that you also have a bunch of stuff that's kind of in the queue.
If you missed the details, we're going to have all that information at the end of the episode as well down below in the description box. So, I want to go back to improv comedy. So, I want to talk about how you encourage entrepreneurs to use humor without undermining their authority.
Well, I think what's really important is that you read the room, right? So, come from a very tight knit family. And oftentimes, what happens in a tight knit family, maybe this has happened to you, is there's a lot of teasing that can happen, right? And sometimes that teasing is lighthearted, and sometimes that teasing cuts a little bit. So I learned just as a kid growing up, you can do both, right? Like you probably can too, right? Like we know what's appropriate and what we could do. But I realized doing improv that I would get bigger laughs from the audience. I had more of a connection with the other people I was on stage with if I used my powers for good, right? So if I knew I was witty, I knew I was quick, and I realized that if I make people look good and I could figure out turns of phrase that were fun and just funny and sort of just in the moment or just whatever's kind of happening, not dirty, not political, not mean, that those are all perfectly appropriate for a business setting. And it does help to build rapport. It does help for people to understand that it's you talking and it's not just AI talking, right? All of those things I have found have been very, very helpful, but it's mostly just that idea of in improv, we always try to make our fellow improvisers look good. So I want to make you look good and I want to use my powers for good. And when I can put those two things together, then it helps other people sort of learn by my example how they too can bring humor and levity into a meeting without it necessarily going down a path that may not be helpful for the creative ideas that you want to get flowing during the course of the call.
Now, you did mention specific areas and reading the ring.
Yeah.
So, I want to get your it on the common mistakes you see people make when using.
So, first of all, just remember that we're all improvising, right? None of us wakes up in the morning, opens the door, and has a script, right? So, we're all improvising. We're all coming up with stuff off the cuff, and we're all going off book, right? All of that kind of stuff is just sort of how we all are operating. So, I have found that just understanding where people are at, having a lot of empathy for them. If it seems like someone is having a rough time, a joke about like the weather or something innocuous could absolutely help to lighten the mood. Or it may not make sense to go with a joke at the time, right? This is where empathy is very important. Some of the ways that I talk to my clients about adjusting their marketing to make it about their audience, not making about them, really comes into play. Because when you make it about your audience, you put yourself in their shoes and you start empathizing with them, even if you're not exactly sure who they are yet. So that way, when you have a meeting with them, you've already kind of done that. You've already had that empathy and you've built up that muscle. Quick little thing that I like to do to put myself in other people's shoes, especially even just with marketing content. This is going to seem really dumb, but I like to switch from first person to second person. So here's what I mean by that. So instead of saying, if you come to my webinar, I'm going to teach you all about this, and I'm going to teach you all about that, and I'm going to teach you all about this. Instead, you say, when you come, you will learn this. You will understand this. You will understand that. You see the difference in everything being about me to everything being about them and their experience. So when you use that in your writing, you put that in your videos, and then you have your meetings where it's that point of view, automatically it helps you read the room a little bit better because you're putting yourself in their shoes more.
Again, you're missing out on the gems. I want to talk about communication. Since starting your business, how has your approach to communication changed?
When I was first getting started, I really wanted people to know that I didn't think that people were going to believe me. I didn't have a marketing degree. I didn't work for an agency. I didn't know all the things that I felt like the real marketers knew. And so the content that I was creating, I was trying to make myself look smart. And I was trying to just share all the books that I was reading and everything that I was doing so that way they understood that I knew my stuff. But I realized that is very much me trying to almost prove it to myself, trying to prove it to the audience. Now, what I have found works really well is laying out a path for my clients and saying, look, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to figure out what words it is that you're going to use in your marketing. Second, we're going to make sure everyone on your team has access to those words, and those are the words that we keep pulling from. And third, we're going to make sure that those words show up in some key places where they're most likely to wind up with your audience, right? So I paint a picture. Or let's say I'm consulting with them. I'll say, look, in the first 3 months, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to do together. By the end of our time together, this is where you're going to get to. This is what it's going to look like. And here's how I've seen that work in the past. This is what happened when I worked for this person. This is what happened when I did it for the client who was on Shark Tank and got a $250,000 deal. This is the path that I've set up, and this is how it has worked for them. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work for you. So it's really so much more about them and where they're going.
And again, communication is one of those big words in business. You have to be able to communicate, but we also have to be able to market
Yes.
in order to get our businesses out there. How do you help entrepreneurs be seen more consistently?
Yeah. So one thing that I do is we start small, right? So a lot of the people who first started working with me, when I went from a performer to a marketer, was when I was frustrated that shows that were getting canceled because there weren't enough audience members. So I decided that I would learn more about marketing just so that way we could get more people to the show.
Mhm.
And because I learned more about marketing, then people started saying to me, hey, you know about this thing. Can you help? I've got a book coming out, or I've got a show that's happening, or I've got this new thing that I want people to know about. Can you help me? And so, first, what I like to do with new entrepreneurs is have them start small and do those networking meetings with the people that they already know, with their colleagues, with, as I call it in simple social media, with the people in your neighborhood, right? That you can talk to. And we figure out together, what are the words that you're going to use? How are you going to talk about what it is that you offer so people know, what do you offer? How is it going to make their lives better? And how can they get it? So we'll usually do that. And then we'll start figuring out what channels they should be on. Usually it's less than they think. And then figuring out how they're going to show up on those channels.
I want to get your advice for our women entrepreneurs out there. If, say, they're feeling a bit nervous or overwhelmed, where can they begin right now in starting that business to where they might gain some confidence?
Woo! This is a tricky question. One is offer less things, right? So, Jonte, give me an example of a kind of business that one of your listeners has.
Graphic design.
Graphic design. Okay. So maybe with graphic design, they might have a meeting with someone and they're like, yeah, oh no, I can do everything. Whatever you need me to do. Like if it's visual, I can do it. I know Canva, I know all the programs, I can make it happen. What I find is really helpful is to just really try to sort of professionalize your operation and figure out what is the thing that I am offering. And just get really, really clear on that. So if it's like for a certain amount of money per month, you have access to me for 2 meetings a month, and I will work on this project with whatever it is, right? Figure out what that is and write down what it is that you do, because you're probably doing a lot and you're probably doing a lot of really great things and you don't always realize it. So it's just having a sense of what it is that you're offering, taking a look at that and making sure that your prices reflect it. Because oftentimes people are like, oh yeah, well, I usually then just give people something at the end of the month that shows them what I did. And I was like, yeah, that's a monthly report. Your audience needs to know that that's something you offer. Not everybody offers that. So that's an extra thing, right? So make sure that you incorporate that into the pricing. That's going to take you time to put that together. That's going to add value to your overall experience with them. So that should be reflected in your pricing, right? So that's one thing. It's just recognizing that what you're doing is valuable and it's important. And write it down because you may not realize all those little things that you do when you deliver things to your clients. Another thing that you can do is start writing down wins. This is going to be important for you, just for your mindset, because there's going to be some days where you feel like you're not doing it, where it's not working, where this is a huge waste of time and money and energy. And why are you even bothering? And you will be able to go back to those wins and realize that you helped your clients get to a better place than they were before. Also, this will come into play when you have sales calls and people want to know, well, do you actually do the thing that you do? If you don't have a good list already, just a little place, something in your notes or whatever, where you've written down, this just happened to me 2 weeks ago. So I was updating I'm certified in StoryBrand, right? And so because of that, I'm on this listing. I think it's called Marketing Made Simple, that people can go there or hire a guy. I can't remember exactly, but it's a listing that I'm on, right? And I decided that I would kind of share some of my wins so that way people know, oh yeah, she actually delivers results for her clients. I have completely forgotten that 5 years ago, I started a nonprofit with a bunch of people who are all on Broadway. I was the only person in the organization who wasn't nominated for a Tony Award. And in the first 9 weeks that we had launched this nonprofit that we created for artists who were in difficult situations during COVID, the team and I came up with the words that we were going to use to ask for donations. And we got $100,000 in donations in the first 9 weeks, right? Like that's a big deal. But because it happened a long time ago, I had kind of forgotten about it, right? But I went back and I was like, no, that's important. People need to know that those are the kinds of results that the right words can get them. So write down those wins. At first, it's going to be for you, and then it's going to be for your clients.
And Just so you guys know, that writing down your small wins, even if you don't do any of the other stuff, that in itself can change your mindset and keep you going even on those hard days. I know myself, I've done that, and I'm here to verify what is telling you guys today is very valid. Now, we like to leave always with a legacy. Yes. And we want to hear from you. Years from now, when people look back on your work, how do you want them to remember you?
Well, I want them to think that every time they experience a moment with me, whether it was online or in person, that it was smart, that it was fast paced, and that it was funny. That's always what I try to bring to the table. That's a key part of my branding. But I do think that it's really important that other people recognize that their work matters and they can get themselves out of very difficult situations by putting in the work.
Absolutely. And we've run out of time today.
No.
I know I can continue on with this for hours because I love to learn more about the improv comedy and all the different ways you've incorporated it into downstage media. But sadly, we run out of time.
Uh, okay.
But before we leave,
Yes.
I do want to get all your information, your social media sites. How can we sign up for your services? And again, let us know where we can find the book.
Sure. So go to downstage.media. That's my website, downstage.media. And you'll be able to schedule a call. If you are listening to this podcast and you just want a little bit of help to figure out how to talk about the words that you use, schedule a time, get on my calendar. Let me know that this is how you found out about it. I would be happy to offer you a 30-minute call. And you could go to downstage.media. You'll also find my blog on there. I give out all this kind of well, I mean, we got a little bit deeper than I oftentimes talk about. I usually keep things about marketing and messaging on my blog, but go on there. You'll hear all the tips and tricks that I have there. So downstage.media, you'll be able to schedule a call, go to the blog, and then you could find me on LinkedIn. So my last name is kind of just like it sounds, Figenshu, and you could look for me there as well. But downstage.media is the best place to start.
Again, thank you so much. And before we leave, I do want to offer you one final word. Anything else before we adjourn today's meeting?
Your work matters and it deserves to be seen. So let's get it out there.
And with that being said, the meeting is now adjourned. Thanks again to Miss Annie Figenshu of Downstage Media for coming on today and offering us all of her insights. And you be sure to subscribe to About Her Business wherever you receive your podcast so you never miss an upload. Also, leave us some comments down in that comment section to let us know which industry you think we should interview next. Until next time, keep those goals tight, those circles tighter, and those bank accounts growing.
Bye bye. Are there snacks after this meeting?